They say a mother's love is the first miracle a child experiences, but mine felt like a curse. My name is Obina. I was born on a cold Harmattan morning in a dusty village in Ebonyi State. From the moment I arrived in this world, my mother looked at me not with joy, but with something darker disgust, maybe even hatred. People say she wept the day I was born, not because she was overwhelmed with love, but because I was the one she swore she never wanted. I was the accident she never forgave herself for. Growing up, my earliest memories weren't of lullabies or warm embraces. They were of shouts, being dragged by the hair for things I didn't do, of cold nights on the kitchen floor while my brothers slept in beds. I would wake up to the smell of stew, only to be handed plain Gary and sent away while others ate meat and rice. When I asked why, she would say, "Gary fits your type. Bastards don't deserve meat." I didn't understand it at first. I tried to be good. I swept the compound before dawn. I fetched water. I scrubbed the toilet. I even looked after my younger siblings. But nothing I did ever pleased her. She never called me Obina. Not once. She called me that boy. Even when she introduced me to people, it was always, "This one. He's just there." My father, a drunk who spent more time at the palm wine joint than at home, barely noticed me. And when he did, it was either to lash at me with his belt or accuse me of being the reason his wife no longer smiled. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was school. I wore torn uniforms stitched more times than I could count. My sandals had holes. My socks were mismatched. The other kids called me Obi not a beggar. They threw chalk at me, hid my books, mocked me during assembly. I sat alone during lunch. No one wanted to sit with the boy who smelled like kerosene and palm oil. I got used to it. I became quiet and invisible. One day, during morning assembly, the class clown pulled my shorts down in front of everyone. Laughter roared like thunder. Even the teachers laughed. I stood frozen. My face burned and faded, my dignity crumbling like dry clay. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply picked up my shorts, put them on, and walked away from the assembly. Straight home. That was the day my mother beat me so hard I couldn't walk for 2 days. "You want to disgrace me? You're leaving school," she screamed. "You think you're special. You're nothing but a burden. A cursed child." That night, I decided something. If the world saw me as nothing, I would become something so big they would have no choice but to remember me. And that decision became the flame that kept me alive. There was only one person who ever showed me kindness. An old blind man named Anayo. He ran a roadside bookstore near my school. No one really bought his books, so he spent his days listening to the radio and talking to himself. One afternoon, I helped him pick up a stack of books after some boys kicked over his display. He touched my hand and said, "You are not like the others. I can't see your face, but your voice carries fire." From that day, I visited him every week. He let me borrow books, real books, not the torn textbooks from school. He gave me novels, science magazines, and newspapers. I would read to him, and in return, he taught me how to question the world. Knowledge is power. "Obina," he would say, "and power is the best revenge." When I turned 12, something happened that changed my life forever. My mother accused me of stealing 1,000 naira from her purse. I didn't even know where she kept money, but her mind was made up. She dragged me outside, beat me with a broomstick in front of neighbors, and screamed, "Thief, you will end up in jail like your uncle." I bled that day. My lips cracked. My legs swelled. No one intervened, not even my father. He watched, sipping palm wine like he was at a show. That night, I packed my only pair of jeans, my books from Anayo, and a half-eaten loaf of bread. And I left. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked through the forest paths, past sleeping homes and distant houses. I cried once, only once, then I swallowed my pain. I arrived in Enugu City 3 days later, hungry, barefoot, and sick. That was the beginning of my second life. I slept under bridges. I worked as a conductor. Later, I worked at a car wash. I was slapped, cheated, insulted. But I never stole, and I never begged. I used every naira I earned to buy food and pay to use the internet cafe near the bus park. The owner, Mr. Emmanuel, noticed me one day when I corrected a customer struggling with an online form. Computer, he asked. I nodded and replied, "Small." He gave me a weekend job cleaning the place, and in return, I got 30 minutes of computer time every day. That was all I needed. I learned faster than anyone expected. I devoured tutorials, learned how to build websites, watched coding videos, slept in the cafe sometimes. Mr. Emmanuel eventually gave me a mattress in the storeroom. Years passed. By 19, I had created a simple mobile app that helped traders track goods across rural markets. I pitched it at a local tech event. People laughed at first, until I showed them how it worked. That week, I got my first investor. By 23, I was in Lagos, sitting across from international tech giants. By 25, I made Forbes Africa's cover as the youngest self-made billionaire in West Africa. Now let me tell you how fate plays its games. One evening, while preparing for a keynote speech, a video surfaced online. A poor woman from a village in Ebonyi was recorded wailing on local TV that her son, now a billionaire, Hadn't come home or sent a dime. It was my mother. She sat on a broken plastic chair, fake tears in her eyes, saying, I raised him with all my sweat. I suffered for him. Now he has forgotten me. She had no idea the video would go viral, and she had no idea I had seen it. But I didn't call. I didn't reply. I simply watched in silence, with no emotion. Because what do you do when the woman who caused your birth now cries for your blessings? I sat in silence, the video still playing on my screen. My assistant had forwarded it to me without saying a word. She knew. There she was. My mother, the same woman who once beat me till I bled, who cursed the day I was born. Now sitting in a faded Ankara blouse, crying fake tears before the local news crew, her voice cracked as she sniffed dramatically. I haven't eaten for days. My only son, Obina, he has abandoned me. I raised him with nothing, gave him everything. Now he wouldn't even pick my calls. Those were all lies because I never received a single call. Did she even have my number? She wiped her nose with the edge of her wrapper, then stared directly into the camera, her voice trembling. Obina, my son, if you see this, please come back home. Your mother needs you. My stomach turned, my lips parted, but no words came out, just air and disbelief. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was angry, but because some part of me, a small, stupid part, still ached for a version of her that never existed. A version that would have held me close and said, my son, I see you. But that version was a dream I killed long ago. Still, something in me stirred. Schedule a trip, I told Chuma, my assistant. The next morning, to Abuja, she asked. I looked up from my coffee and said, no. To Ebony, back home. She paused. Your mother's village. Yes, I said. But, Obina, with all due respect, are you sure that's a good idea? No, I said quietly, but it's necessary. The news spread like wildfire within hours. Obina Okafor returns to his village. After 13 years of silence, from bridge boy to billionaire, he's going home. Village on fire as Africa's youngest tech tycoon plans a surprise visit. Those were the headlines that morning. Everyone wanted to come, journalists, NGOs, even politicians. But I told them no, this was personal. We arrived quietly at dawn. My convoy drove past the village square. The air smelled of red dust and burning firewood. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the village was already buzzing because words travel fast in places like this. Children ran barefoot through the narrow streets, chasing the headlights. Women paused from fetching water to whisper and point. I stepped out of my car in a plain white shirt, jeans, and sandals. No gold chain, no suit, no bodyguards, just me. And yet, I had never felt more powerful. My mother's compound hadn't changed. The zinc roof still leaked in the corners. The walls were stained with age, the paint peeling off like old scabs. I paused by the gate and breathed deeply. Then I knocked. It was my younger brother, Chinedu, who opened the door. He froze when he saw me. Obina. He looked older, tired, worn out, but still recognizable. The last time we spoke, Chinedu had thrown sand in my face and laughed when our mother nearly beat me to death. Now his lips quivered. You came? I nodded. Where is Mama? He pointed inside, almost too afraid to speak. She was sitting in her usual spot, the plastic chair by the corner of the hut, still in the same wrapper from the video, this time with a scarf tied tightly around her head. She was chewing on garden eggs, talking loudly to no one in particular. When she saw me, her eyes widened, and for a moment, just a flicker, there was something like shame. Then she rose quickly, pretending to limp, and rushed toward me. Obina, my son, my golden boy. You came. I didn't move. She hugged me, her grip strong and desperate. My God has done it. My prayers worked. He came back to me. I stood stiff as a statue. When she let go, I looked her in the eye and said, you called me a curse. Her smile faded. You beat me. You starved me and left me to rot. Do you remember, or should I remind you? She was silent. I was 12. I continued. You dragged me outside and beat me with broomsticks while the neighbors watched. You said I'd end up in prison like Uncle Kalichi, that I was born to suffer. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. So tell me, Mama, why now? Why are you crying for me on television when you buried me alive long before I left? She looked around nervously. Neighbors were gathering, watching, some with pity, others with morbid curiosity. I was confused. Obina, life was hard. Your father, he didn't help. I was young, and you hated me, I said, cutting her off. You hated me, and that's the truth. Her tears came quickly, but they didn't move me. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, I said firmly. You are sorry because I'm successful. If I had died in the city, you would have said it was a curse that followed me. But now I'm rich. I'm suddenly your golden boy. She knelt suddenly, right there in the red sand. The crowd gasped. Forgive me. Obina, I was blind. I didn't know you'd become this. I didn't know. I looked down at her, my heart like stone. Then I turned and walked away. That night, I booked every student in the village's primary and secondary schools a scholarship. I donated brand new laptops, sponsored a clean water project, and promised to build a modern learning center that would be named after the only man who saw my worth, Anayo. I didn't mention my mother, not even once. She stood at the edge of the crowd during the event, her face tight, surrounded by people whispering. Some pitied her, others mocked her. But me, I felt nothing until later that night, when a little boy tapped me on the arm. He looked about 10, skinny, with dusty feet and a torn shirt, and he stared at me with wide eyes. "Are you really Obina Okafor?" I smiled. "Yes, I am." He grinned shyly. "My mama said I should learn to be like you, that no matter how people treat me, I should never stop believing in myself." I froze, then slowly knelt beside him. "What do you believe?" He looked at the stars and replied, "I believe I can become president one day." I ruffled his hair gently, my eyes stinging. "You will? Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Never let their hate become your truth." He nodded. And right there, for the first time in years, I felt peace. But it wouldn't last long because the next morning, a scandal would break that would shake everything a secret about my past that someone was trying to use against me. And guess who leaked it? The next morning started like a dream. I woke up to the sound of birdsong and distant church bells, still reeling from the overwhelming crowd at the scholarship ceremony the night before. The headlines were already rolling in. Obina Okafor uplifts his village with $2 million education fund. From abandoned child to national hero. Obina gives hope. The media had painted her as a suffering, regretful mother of a once-forgotten son, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't feel the belts on my back or hear the names she called me when no one was watching. I sipped my tea slowly, staring out the window of a small lodge I had rented nearby. My assistant, Chuma, knocked and entered with a concerned look on her face. "You might want to sit down for this." I raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" She handed me her tablet, already loaded with the video link. "This was just posted on a gossip blog, and it's spreading fast," she said. I clicked play. There she was again, my mother. But this time, not crying, not begging. This time, she was smiling, seated in someone's backyard with a woman I didn't recognize holding a camera, and she was talking loudly, casually. "He wasn't even my husband's child," she said, laughing. "I always knew. The moment he was born with that nose, I knew he wasn't from my husband's blood. That's why I hated him. He reminded me of the mistake I made." The camerawoman gasped. "Are you saying Obina is not your husband's son?" My mother laughed again. "He was from a man I met before marriage. I was young and foolish. I never told anyone, not even Obina. But he thinks he's a big man now. If he knew the truth, maybe he'll stop acting like he owns the world." My vision blurred. My hand froze around the cup. A slow, painful tightness wrapped itself around my chest. Chuma's voice came from far away, muffled by the ringing in my ears. "Your mother sold the recordings to 3 blogs. One of them claimed she asked for 10 million naira to keep it quiet." I stared at the screen as my mother kept talking nonchalantly, as if she were discussing the weather, dismissing my existence like I was an unwanted stain on her memory. "She never told me," I whispered. "I don't think anyone knew," Chuma said gently. "Your father raised you, but biologically, she claims you're someone else's child." I laughed not out of humor, but from the absurdity of it all. So after everything, after the beatings, the hate, the years of abandonment, now she's trying to erase me completely. "She couldn't destroy me in childhood," I said. "Now she wants to ruin me as a man." The video had already racked up hundreds of thousands of views. The comments were brutal. Some people sympathized. Others accused me of being an illegitimate child trying to act righteous. The media was asking questions. Investors were calling, "She's selling this story like it's a joke." I said to myself. Chuma placed a hand on my shoulder. "What do you want to do?" I paused. This wasn't about me anymore. I had become a symbol, a mirror for children across Africa who were abandoned, rejected, cast aside. If I folded now, I'd become another tragedy, added to the statistics. No, I had come too far. "Schedule a press conference," I said. "Tomorrow." Chuma nodded. "What will you say?" I looked her straight in the eyes and replied, "The truth. All of it." The next day, the media gathered under a large white tent in the village. Satellite vans lined the road. Cameramen buzzed like flies. Reporters clutched their notepads tightly, eyes sharp with hunger for a headline. I stepped onto the podium in a simple black shirt. No fanfare, no security, just me and a story that was finally mine to tell. I scanned the crowd, and there she was, my mother, hiding beneath a geal that failed to cover her shame. Seated far at the back, I locked eyes with her once, and she quickly looked away. I took a deep breath. "My name is Obina Okafor," I began, "and for most of my childhood, I believed I was cursed." The crowd leaned in. I was raised by a woman who made it clear every day that I was unwanted. I was beaten, starved, mocked, and humiliated not by strangers, but by my own mother. The same woman who is now calling herself herself the mother of a billionaire. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I slept under bridges. I was called a beggar. I was bullied for my clothes, my smell, my silence. But I rose not because anyone lifted me, but because I refused to stay buried. I taught myself coding in a cyber cafe while washing cars during the day. I built my life from nothing. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. And now, after all these years, the same woman who called me a mistake has decided to sell my story, to label me a bastard and say I never belonged. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't know who my biological father is. But let me tell you what I do know. I looked straight into the camera and said, I know pain. I know rejection. I know what it means to sleep hungry while your brothers eat. I know the fire it takes to rise from nothing and become something the world can't ignore. Thunderous applause erupted. Some reporters had tears in their eyes. My mother sat frozen, shame on her face. I'm not ashamed of where I come from. I continued, because my story is no longer just my story. It belongs to every child who was ever told they were a mistake. I stepped down, and the crowd surged with emotion. People stood up and clapped. Some hugged each other. A few women wailed softly, and I walked past my mother without saying a word. That night, I sat alone on the balcony of the lodge. Chuma brought me a bottle of water and sat beside me. You broke the internet, she said with a small smile. You're trending in 4 countries, and the donations are pouring in for your new school project. I nodded slowly and said, it's not about the fame. Chuma, it's about finally being free. She looked at me and asked, do you feel free? I thought about the boy who sat in the corner of the class with torn sandals, about the child who flinched at every raised voice, about the boy who believed he was never good enough. Then I looked at the man I had become. Yes, I said, for the first time in my life, I feel free. She smiled and stood up to leave. Just as she reached the door, I spoke again. Have you ever wondered why some mothers can love one child and hate another? She paused and said, I have. What if she hated me because she saw a part of herself she couldn't forgive? I replied. Chuma turned slowly and said, what part? The part that dared to dream beyond her own pain. But even as I embraced my newfound freedom, life wasn't done with me yet, because 2 weeks later, a man showed up at my Lagos office, a stranger, middle-aged, tall, and nervous-looking. And he carried a letter. My name is Dominic, he said, and I believe I might be your father. I had just returned from a speaking event in Ghana when Chuma met me at the airport with a pale face and a letter in her hand. There's someone waiting at the office, she said carefully. He claims he might be your father. For a moment, time stood still. I'd buried that question a long time ago. I'd buried it beneath survival, success, and every scar my childhood had carved into my memory. Who my real father was didn't matter. I had become my own man, standing at the airport gate, holding that letter in my hand. The ache returned, that ache of never knowing where you came from. I arrived at the office late in the evening. The lights were dim, and everyone had gone home except for the man sitting silently in the waiting lounge. Tall, salt and pepper hair, weathered skin, and eyes that carried a guilt I recognized too well. Obina, he said, standing. I didn't speak. I simply looked at him, my arms crossed, my heart racing like a child who had just peeked behind a forbidden door. I'm Dominic, he said softly. Your mother, she and I were together before she met your father. We were young, stupid, in love, but my parents refused. She left, and I didn't even know she was pregnant. I clenched my jaw. Why now? He reached into his pocket and handed me a photograph. It was old, faded 2 young people in their late teens, smiling at the camera, and another of him holding a newborn, maybe a few months old. The resemblance was their sharp cheekbones, that stubborn jawline. I found out last month, he continued. A relative from your village recognized your mother's name in one of your interviews. When I saw your face on TV, I knew it was you. I sat down slowly. She never told me, I muttered. She punished me my entire life for a choice I never made. He nodded, his eyes filled with pain. She hated herself, Obina, and she took it out on you. I looked at him, fighting the burn in my throat. Do you know what it's like to be unwanted? To be beaten like a dog? To be told you're the reason someone's life is cursed? He shook his head and replied, no, I don't, but I wish I could take your pain. I stood up and said to him, you can't. The pain is what made me who I am, and for that, I'm no longer ashamed. He looked at me, his voice trembling, and said, I have a wife now, and children. I don't want to replace anything. I just wanted to know my son. The word son hit like a thunderclap in my chest. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because I'd never heard it spoken with such softness. I nodded slowly. We'll see where this goes, one step at a time. A month passed. I didn't speak to my mother. She didn't try to reach out to me either. Perhaps shame had finally built a prison strong enough to keep her inside. But I couldn't ignore the pull. So one humid Saturday, I returned to the village alone. No press, no assistant, just me. Her compound was quieter than before. Weeds growing at the edges, the zinc roof rusting again. I knocked, and she answered. Her face was thinner, her eyes sunken. She didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. I heard, she said, moving aside to let me in. We sat in silence, the air between us thick with unspoken history. Then she broke it. I watched your speech. I deserved every word. I didn't reply. I was angry, she said softly. Not at you, at myself. Because I made a mistake. I was ashamed. And when you were born, you reminded me of that mistake every day. I clenched my fist, so you punished me as a child for your regrets. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was young, Obina, poor, and scared. And when your father found out you were not his child, he told me to never speak of it. I was trapped, and I hated you because you were the truth I couldn't hide. You let me suffer, I said. You watched me bleed, and you said nothing. I know, she sobbed, and I will live with that for the rest of my life. I stood up, ready to walk away. But her voice caught me mid-step. I kept something, she said. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe hope. She walked to the corner and pulled out a small, rusted tin box. Inside were drawings, my childhood sketches, school results, the first award I ever won, and a tiny, torn notebook where I had once written, "One day, I'll be more than what they see." I stared at the words, my handwriting. My hope. She wiped her face and said, I kept every piece of you I didn't deserve. For a moment, the child in me stirred not for revenge, not for justice, but for closure. I don't hate you, I said quietly. But I can't love you either. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I'll never be you, and that is enough. 6 months later, I stood in front of a crowd of 1,000 at the grand opening of the Anayo Center for Orphaned and Abandoned Children, named after the only man who ever saw worth in me when the world didn't. Dominic, my real father, was in the front row beside his wife. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. Chuma stood at my side, holding back tears as I cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed, and children cheered. And somewhere in the back of the crowd, I saw her, my mother, standing alone, hands clasped, silent. And for the first time, I didn't feel rage. I felt released. Today, I speak to children across Africa, children who sleep under bridges, who are told their curses, who are beaten, silenced, and forgotten. I tell them, they threw me away like trash. Now the world knows my name. This story teaches us that pain can build empires and rejection can raise kings. You don't need their love to succeed. You don't need their approval to matter. What you need is fire in your soul and the courage to rise. Even if your own mother calls you a curse, your future can still call you a blessing. Never forget, the same people who buried you alive might one day watch you bloom on every screen. Because I was once the boy they threw away, and now I'm the man they can never forget.